Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thanks for joining us here today. My name is Nadine Khalil. I'm a writer and an editor based in Dubai, and I'm joined by a group of panelists, all from UAE art organizations and environmental organizations, and Mara, the founder and CEO of Firetti Contemporary. This is our this is the gallery's second panel that deals with issues of anthropogenic change. The relationship between arts and the environment. And it's in the context of the show that you see here, which is called Praxis of Change. So obviously here we're looking at art as a form of praxis, which means we're looking at how can art engage in meaningful action that supports social change, especially given the climate catastrophe that we're facing at the moment. I must say this is a very relevant topic if you consider that at Frieze this year, it was the first time that you had a coalition of galleries called Gallery Climate Coalition that are actively working to reduce their carbon footprint, and they serve almost as advisors. So it's like a consortium of 200 galleries that are really trying to, because if you think of it, the art world is quite wasteful, not just in terms of flights, but also in terms of material. What happens to the material when the show is over? And so here we are surrounded by works that look at the reuse of material, but also look at the idea of raw material. In front of me, we have a work that looks at the idea of oil extraction. A lot of the works here also engage with our relationship to the land. So it's a very environmentally engaging show. And there's also references here to water, marine biology, and locally sourced materials. So first, let me introduce Mara again, who's an entrepreneur, and she represents emerging and established artists here in the UAE at Firetti. Spent 15 years as an art advisor and promoter, and you have dedicated your career to develop the career of Khalid Jija. And so I guess I'm going to start by, my first question is to you. First of all, why are you looking at sustainability through art practice? And do you see that there's a future of this in terms of longevity, or is it just a trend? You know, that's basically my first question.
Well, as our gallery believes in the inspiring power of art, the art that moves the viewers. And I believe that environment is something that we should all look at, because it comes to us no matter our level in society or where we're based or what we're doing as of now. So through the art, we are trying to engage the public in a sustainable action. Why do we embrace environmental issues? It's because also it is our mission as a gallery. The way we work is to bring forth the message of our artists. We have about 20 artists collaborating with us that we established a relationship, and they're coming from different angles of the world, or coming to us with a different approach. And it is contemporary art, because contemporary art is it's reflecting the times we're living in. And the new generation of art is focusing on the environment, because environment is a focal point right now, especially as we all were exposed to the United Nations latest report about climate change. Alarming data was revealed, and all countries are embracing most countries are embracing the net zero by 2050. So from the beginning of time, art has been a vehicle to deliver emotions and messages. And it's the purest form of communication. And that's why we're coming from the art corner to deliver this message, which is important to our society, to obtain some sort of reaction from the public.
I mean, in a way, it makes sense, because art was our first language, right?
Exactly.
So human beings drew before they spoke. But I find it interesting today, just having observed the art world for the last 2 decades, is that artists somehow are being called to respond to the environmental crisis and kind of bridge an interdisciplinary way of looking at science as well, maybe in a way to make it more accessible to the public, but also there is a real movement, I would say. Like if you look at all the biennials, if you look even 2 or 3 years ago in Istanbul, it was all about the climate crisis. So
yeah,
I really
it's a new environmental era. So the art is approaching it because it's a way to reaching out and sensibilizing the public.
But there is a contradiction too, because art does produce so much waste. And so, you know, I think we're in a time where we're looking, we need a paradigm shift, basically. And so this is why the world is rallying, but it is a bit, there is a contradiction there. And that's why I would actually like to move to Dina Story from EXPO. You're the head of sustainability there. And I mean, from what I know, 80% of the site of EXPO will be a future city, right? So it will be called District 2020. And I mean, how do you deal with this question of waste? I mean, given all the production, all the flights, all the materials that are being used to create this massive site. And I know that they will be reused, but you know, as well, like there's a lot of energy that's going into this. So how do you deal with this at EXPO?
Very good question. Thank you for having me, and it's an honor to be here again. It's a very good question. It's not just 80% of the site, it's over 80% of the site will stay for District 2020. EXPO was built for legacy, wasn't built just to be an EXPO. In terms of the materials we use, we actually have very strict materials guidelines. Mm-hmm. So when a country, even us, when we start building, we follow our materials guidelines, and the materials guidelines has to say that the embodied carbon of the materials that we're using have to be less. We do not use any materials that are harmful to the planet. So all of the wood, for example, has to be FSC certified, cannot come from an endangered place. It has to have it cannot affect the people who will be living or inhabiting this space in any negative way from a health perspective. Mm-hmm. So that's the gist of our materials guidelines, and that's how we built the site. As far as our waste is concerned, waste is a big topic, and we manage and monitor our waste, but we've also found ingenious or innovative ways of using the circular economy to mitigate our waste from going to landfill. So as of today, and it's very interesting, our waste diversion from landfill is at 91%.
From the production, right?
Sorry,
we're talking about
from the construction of the site,
exactly.
Of course. And so the idea of it is not just to say, oh, it's 91%, but to say it's 91% because we did 1, 2, 3, 4. And then that transparency of putting it out there in a report and saying anybody can do this if we did it, is how we wanted to make sure that our sustainability story comes to life. And the goal is not to say that we are going to be the best, but the goal is to move the needle to the positive and have a ripple effect on the entire supply chain, not just within Dubai, but regionally and globally, because there's learnings to come from what we've done.
You know, I think it's interesting because when we're looking at the corporate frameworks or government or non-government frameworks, usually it's kind of discipline and punish. It's, you know, it's setting standards and penalizing those who like use too much capacity or who are wasteful. But when we're looking at the arts, this is really voluntary, and it's really, it comes out of a certain intention. I'm not saying that it's necessarily more noble, but it's a different category altogether, which leads me to Sharbel, who's the artist here with us today, the artist. Sharbel, you're from Samuel Own, you're from Lebanon, you're both an artist and an architect. And since I've known you, you've been working with land, with the material of land. And as we all know, Beirut experienced a very damaging blast last year that caused a lot of physical, mental, environmental, emotional damage. And your work is right here. And what I find interesting about your work is not only do you use raw natural materials, but you kind of look at, you construct it by referring to a destruction. So there's an apocalyptic way of looking at your work. And recently you've just been filming like a video that maybe you can tell us more about that looks at all the rubble, so all the actual damage that happened from the blast. And maybe you can tell us more about the heap, it's called, right?
Yeah. Hello, everyone. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you for coming.
And thanks for all of you for being here. I'm thanking everyone for being here. These beautiful people, this good consciousness, and you as good listeners. Actually, Nadine just mentioned the deteriorating part that we survived in Lebanon, and it made me question a lot about how to keep on through this sort of social decomposition. And somehow I felt like there's a way through decomposition. I mean, like we as humans try to always push decomposition away, but we are also decomposing. But
as bodies, yeah.
And in nature, it's the decomposition is generous. I mean, like there's no death. Death is part of life. Everything is decomposing to give for others. So it's very generous. And when a tree dies, it gives sunlight and it decomposes with nutrition for others. So I was questioning how to act or what's the meaning of action today. And the videos, actually, they were more like action that I needed to do. I mean, the explosion broke the barrier between my forest, which I planted 15 years ago, and the social dimension. So I just went there as a farmer, and I was believing like we had too much spatial impact on our life. I mean, like since 23 years, I was questioning that, what is this reality? Like all these buildings growing. And we all know the question of building. It's basically based on the square meter strategy, and there's no real look about the human part in that. We are impacted and influenced in our behavior, in our needs, in our taste. So it's like one big totalitarian, the square meter strategy. So when everything fell down as a social mechanisms, I felt like now maybe we have to be space instead of being influenced by space. And for that, maybe we just need to act.
But what you're doing in this film is you're replanting.
In
the rubble plants, right? Like that's what I understood.
And then these rubbles, it was like this new medium in the city. You can find it everywhere. And I know it's sad, but it's here now, the new body. I thought like we can decompose more. Like these rubbles, we can break it into dust, into like some sort of new earth. And I planted the aloe arborescens that survived and that can survive in these
extreme
conditions of soil. And it was somehow like a medicinal space because relating to the lack of hospitals and so you can just go there, take a part and treat yourself. It's and how the piéton, how the track, because this bodies blocked streets, blocked piéton. So how the walkway can change through this rubble. in this medicinal space.
You know,
So
it's
this is-
interesting because you have older works from 2006, right? 16?
Yeah, 15 and 16.
And 16, and you have the latest video, and in a way where you were building, constructing grids of destruction, and you know, with your former works, now you're going further down into the ground in a way. So it's almost like a reverse cycle because of the blast, looking at another process again.
I was constructing, but by what civilization was destructing. So the small stones I brought from a quarry,
Yeah, quarries, yeah.
Quarry, yeah. And I was like just juxtaposing the pine needles because we were killing a lot of trees, and as if because we were born in war, both of us, right? And after war, for me, it was a bigger war.
Yeah.
The devastating part of capitalism and the strategy of selling.
And what happened to
else.
space around us, right?
Yeah. And that made me question a lot about you know, what we are losing as also sort of languages, because now we are talking about sustainability, but our mechanism of thoughts is also the child of this industrial, conceptual, technological civilization. And I was also searching maybe for abstract languages today.
Yeah.
So I believe in intuition as a path, because sometimes it's more clear than the concept.
I think it's interesting because you're an example of an artist that intervenes on the ground, you know, so it's like an action, as we were talking earlier. But I want to move from land to water, and Nadine Khalil de San Vicente, I definitely did not pronounce it properly. Yeah, okay. So you're the program director for Water Alliance, which is based in Dubai. And as we know, I mean, you know, we're living in a part of the world where water is a major scarce resource. And, you know, some people say the future wars are going to be over water, especially in this region. And so I find it interesting because we had a conversation earlier where you said everything is water. And I was wondering if you could qualify this for our audience here today, and also tell us more what you're doing in terms of looking at water in Dubai.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for having me in this interesting panel discussion. I'm representing here Water Alliance, and we are a non-profit organization. So we are a civil society organization here talking on the value of water. And absolutely what we intend to do is to create a movement for sustainable living, starting with the smart water behaviors. And
sorry, can you raise your voice a bit?
Sure.
Thank you.
And as you were mentioning, water is in everything, is what we call the virtual water footprint, because we were talking about consumption, and consumption drive enormously all the materials, and including water and energy. And this is very important, I think, to understand today that everything is interconnected. We like to bring issues around water and raise awareness on the linkage that are between water, energy, and food. We also try to raise awareness on issues related to scarcity, pollution, availability of water, and water diplomacy that you were mentioning. Is a local problem, but it's going to become a global problem, because by 2030, it is estimated that 50% of the population will be facing water scarcity at a high level. So it's time that we put water into context and understand that water as well links all the sustainable development goals. Without water, I think that it will be very difficult for us to succeed. And Our approach is, obviously we work with the youth, but we also try to federate all sector of society, working with corporates, with organizations, government, to bring kind of dialogue and solution. And how we do that is we develop programs that are gamified. And this is where I found that we have a parallelism with the world of arts, because we need a safe space where people feel that there is no boundaries. And when we play a game, actually, we are actually leaving behind all our assumptions, and we just have fun and get a good learning. And what we need and what we think is required is to have that safe space where people are able to be creative and solve problems. And through these gamified programs, what we intend to do as well is to not only raise awareness, but to develop empathy. We had really, when we interact with the public or with the youth, we realize that we are disconnected from nature, and nature actually sustains us. We are producing and destroying nature at a rate that it cannot cope with self-generation. And we love to introduce concepts not only around the water footprint and how can, as actors of society, consume more responsibly, but also concepts like biomimicry, like nature-based solutions, to be more integrative in a way from the natural environment, which actually we are part of it. And it's for us necessary to have also partnerships and bring this interdisciplinary work together, where the art with art actors actually could provide that safe space for participants to look at familiar problems, but from a different angle, and leave behind all boundaries and be creative and come up with transformative solution. That it is what we need, because there is urgency to that.
When you say you target the youth, that makes sense because you're looking at habits, right? But when you're talking about gamification, is this technological or it's actually a game?
It's actually games that we can play, role play. Very simple. I mean, we don't need to be high tech to actually raise awareness.
So it's like focus groups that you do?
We can do team building activities, for instance, but we bring to the human level abstract concepts that we were saying, water diplomacy or the nexus between water, food and energy. We really need to bring all these concepts to the human level and personal level to understand that actually there is something that you can do about it, that is not just abstraction or a concept that is not close to you. That's why we mention empathy as well as a key factor. Empathy plus nuggets of knowledge to actually sparkle action. And we provide a platform actually for interaction and action for these youth to be empowered. Actually, we let them drive their own initiatives. And this is what we feel that also is required. You know, the next generations of water stewards, they have all the capacity in themselves. We just need them to give them the tools and empower them to mobilize their communities and their schools and their families to have a more sustainable future. And they are amazing, creative little people, actually, that we lost through a very rigid education. So I think that, like art, we should provide them an alternative space for education and creating solutions, actually.
I think also its context plays an important role. And if you're looking at underprivileged communities, the challenge is higher, and if you look at places like Africa and India, where there's severe water pollution, but also severe poverty, I think it's, that's why I was interested that you're based here in Dubai, because it's actually a global problem. Right?
It's actually a global problem, and our actions impact others. The way we consume, we are actually creating water issues, and we are fueling climate change as well. And we know that climate change impacts everyone differently. And in countries that are suffering from that, they are going through droughts or through flooding, and they don't have the capacity to face that. So it's very I don't want to put the word ethical here, but I think in a way we all have our responsibility as a citizen of the world to live in a more meaningful way. And that interpretation of the world can be done through a new kind of inquiry thinking that is provided by the art scene. Because we raise questions when we see these pieces of art or when we see your video. So how can we bring nature into the city? How can we reconstruct? What can we do to solve this particular issue that actually is next door? So this questioning, this inquiry-based methodology is necessary for all of us, because we all need to place ourselves back in our environment, in our position. Yes, I'm as a person, what is my responsibility towards my actions? And that's why we think that bringing gamification or giving art space, to giving the freedom to people to rethink and inquire about the world is very important. I'm also providing them the tools to change their behavior.
And speaking of creative solutions, Aftal, your last name, Hefechinar, you are the chief strategist at ENGIE. And I know that you've been working recently with mangroves and with natural solutions as well at the French Pavilion at EXPO. Can you tell us more about ENGIE and more about what you're doing?
Yeah, sure. Thank you for inviting me. We are taking care of another layer of this issue, actually. We are more focused on the energy. Back to 5-6 years, we have translated all our strategy companies to focus on decarbonization fully. We started from our inside. We started changing our way of producing energy first. We closed the coal plants. We are moving from nuclear to renewables and everything. But we also wanted to be the partner of every layer of the society in their way to decarbonization. We started with working with governments first for bigger impact, and then we go to industrial companies to be their partner on decarbonization. Then we are going to cities, municipalities, different concession areas to do that. This year in EXPO, we become the main sponsor to French Pavilion. And at there, we wanted to extend it to the society to show the walk the talk to people in the end. Because yes, you are creating an impact, but also you need to shift the idea of the people towards energy usage. That's why we started working with French Syrian artists, very new age artists, to create an art exhibition for us. To do that, we used our project, we called Blue Carbon Project here in the region, that we are planting mangroves with drones, actually, because mangroves are the trees that are capturing carbon itself. So it's natural way of decreasing the carbon
And they're
emission.
endemic to the region. They're indigenous.
They are. So we take this project and we are working with this artist to make it very appealing for the people, because this exhibition is going to take place in front of French Pavilion. And, you know, Expo is a hectic place that everybody is like walking through. And that's why we wanted a very new age artist.
Who's the artist?
Marianne Mohanna. She's French-Syrian artist. And she uses very colorful art, so that can take the focus of a lot of people when they are passing by the French Pavilion. So we wanted to keep all these layers to understand what decarbonization is and how they can fight with climate change in the energy level, actually.
Yeah, interesting. You know, I feel like this bridge between art and science and technology, it's interesting. In a way, artists are not single actors. They need to be employed by these larger structures in order to do this kind of work, because it's larger than a project, you know. So it's kind of like there was this group where they were trying to advise corporations and think tanks to talk to artists, you know, like you'll get it if you speak to someone completely outside the box. And so now I'm wondering if this is going to be more frequent, where, you know, energy companies and other forms of environmentally aware companies will be employing artists to come up with ideas, you know, which actually brings me...
Before that, I wish, because the only way corporates are using to show is ads. And it is like really boring now. For me, if there can be more corporates who get artists and make joint projects, it can be both supporting the art and also supporting the society at the same time, right? Because arts are not speaking itself, but ads are not speaking.
I mean, if you think about Arte Povera and the impact that it had, and in a way, it completely had this, you know, environmental kind of consciousness to it, you know, like let's use what they call poor materials and make them into, or recycled, and make something out of what is going to be destroyed and remain, you know. So, I mean, in a way, yeah, that's true. But this brings me to Fiordi Fernasca, who's a serial entrepreneur, inventor, and innovator. And you are the CEO of King Kong Construction. And you've actually recently developed this artistic light transmitting concrete. Is that right? Can you tell us more about what that's about?
Yeah, so first let me congratulate Mara on this very beautiful context, and I love it, and I think we should have more of this thing for this important subject. And I would like to start my speech with a simple quote, which is like, the biggest threat to our planet is the belief that someone else will save it, which I totally feel onto it. And I would like to say that we should make the difference starting from the bottom, like from the smallest startups, from the smallest product, and from the simplest product to the more complicated ones. And we have been able to introduce diverse inventions in this regard, as regarding sustainability, and to mix different complementary processes which go together to create the final product. The complementary processes are 3D printing and 3D modeling, and then handcrafting, which together can achieve the final product. And all is done with sustainable materials. We started in the fashion industry by 3D printing and handcrafted fabrics, all sustainable. And then we moved our invention also in the construction industry, because as we know, the two amongst most polluting industries in the world are the fashion industry and the construction industry.
That's so true.
Unfortunately, fast fashion has had a very bad impact on the economy. And as we know nowadays, 60% more clothing is bought compared to 15 years ago. And from this 60% more clothing bought, only half of it is kept at the end of the year.
Yeah.
And furthermore, at the end of each year, 80% of the produced textiles go into a landfill. Can you imagine the problem?
Waste.
So it is a big, big waste.
I just want to add, require about 10,000 liters of water to
Furthermore.
for your pair of jeans, for instance. So,
Can you
yes.
explain that? 10,000 liters of water for one pair?
Throughout the chain, yes.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's incredible. But our production process, on the other hand, is
We've been great for our planet, haven't we?
Yeah, that's true. Our production process is a zero waste production process, which we're proud of achieving
But
that.
aren't they more expensive then?
Well, it depends. It depends. They are less expensive than most luxury products,
Okay.
but maybe a bit more expensive than a standard product, let's say.
See, I think that's also an issue that we need to address, is that anything organic, anything sustainable costs more. So then it really caters to the rich or to the,
No, not at all, I would say, because we have developed a certain way, which is a really cost advantage way to produce things. And we can offer also partially 3D printing, but while at the same time fully sustainable, accessible products to the people that don't have the capability to buy expensive ones, let's say.
Because you're using a combination of man and machine,
Exactly.
right? Okay.
Exactly. So it's the combination of the savoir-faire and the innovation of 3D printing, which go together to create the final product. And furthermore, in the construction industry, our latest product, as you mentioned before, is light transmitting sustainable concrete and gypsum. And we have made a sample, a small souvenir for Mara, for her gallery, which I am going to show you here. So this goes with the logo of the gallery. And this is 3D printed and handcrafted to the smallest detail. And it is all sustainable. Even the frame is made from recycled furniture.
So the logo is in concrete?
No, this is gypsum, but we can also do it in concrete. And if you put the light on the back, let me show you. It transmits the light because that's the main idea behind the product, basically.
Nice.
And we look forward to sensibilize the consumer, because in our opinion, the biggest challenge in this kind of work is the final consumer. Because if the final consumer is not aware of the risks in buying a non-sustainable product and on the harm this product does to the environment, then it is a huge problem for us as a company because we are incapable to sell our sustainable products to the final consumer.
Right.
And we have a total disadvantage in this respect because all the major companies and the major established brands, which have really high marketing budget and potential, are addressing the consumer in different ways, not regarding sustainability. And nowadays, the biggest thing that they do is like they only introduce, for example, one product in a line of 100 products. And they say, okay, this is sustainable, but the other part is not sustainable.
This is the idea I mean by discipline and punish. It's like, how do we get to the point where it becomes a way of life rather than, corporations need to be seen to be sustainable.
And that's why we integrated art in our products. Because since the beginning, we made one-of-one wearable art. So we had a lot of collaboration with designers, digital creators, and artists, and not digital artists, like artists like painters, sculptures, any kind of artist in our collaborations for our products. And then we integrated the same in the light transmitting concrete. Why? Because through art, we can achieve a much broader audience. And the message that you transmit through art is much stronger. It also, exactly, because that's the major concern.
Yeah.
It will start from the public.
It starts from the consumer, from the bottom line.
For example, Dina's work is incredible, but we should also start from the consumer to make them aware because nobody is aware of this. Yeah, okay, sorry. From the people.
Yeah, exactly. When you look at them as a person, you use it.
As the user, exactly.
As the user.
I'm already getting comments on the chat. Wow, how can we buy this? By the way. So last but not least, I'd like to move to Karsten Senne-Schmidt, who is the managing partner at Digital Energy. And you're looking at AI kind of power-driven solutions and other smart processes. I guess, the digital world is, is all-encompassing. We can't escape it. But so I guess my question to you is there any role of materiality in the digital world? Because, we seem to think that the digital world is immaterial, but in fact, it takes up a lot of space and it uses a lot of energy. And so how are you dealing with that at the Digital Energy organization?
Great question. First, thank you for the invitation, Mara. And I'm truly humbled to be among so great minds that are putting their energy into a very important agenda. We actually call digital energy, and our slogan is the art of technology. And we truly believe that digital is also a way of projecting the material world into the future. You said art was the first language. I think digital is the latest language we have. And that comes with, from our side, now that we understand digital, we know how to use it, that comes with a certain responsibility from our side. We believe in data democracy, and we work with some of the biggest industrial companies out there. I have a long career with industrial companies, and the waste that happens in energy, in water, in various processes to achieve the product, to achieve the profit, to achieve the revenue is incredible. And we see that through digital, through using and bringing order to the chaos of the data that's out there, we can drive efficiencies. We want to do more with less, and that's really at the heart of what we do. Art is often used also where you have conflict. So I think you do it beautiful, how you bring the conflict into your art and you message conflict through art. Sustainability is also about conflict. You have on one side the growth of economies. You have hunger on people's tables. If you go to certain parts of emerging countries, you would have them so hungry for energy so they can have food. Other places, it's so easy to say, well, let's go renewable.
Yeah.
That art, or using art to have a discussion around that conflict, we try to use digital for that. Of course, on a micro scale, of course, for companies, but we try to make the right decision easy.
Yeah.
And unavoidable, hopefully.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I would like to pose this question to the audience. How do you see art in relation to the digital realm? Is art still only material? I'll start with you, Sharbel, actually.
Can you repeat?
How do you see art in the digital realm? Is art still only material?
Well, I believe in the relationship between the mind and the soul. So you have the soul with these languages of connection with material. And you also have the development of the mind that reflects in technology. Technology, basically, we reach this point by observing nature and by understanding nature. But the main trick is the spirit behind. I mean, do we want to use technology to dominate nature or to be part of the ecological
We've not dominated
chain?
nature. I think that's what the past 2 years
This is the main
have proven.
problem, actually. I mean, like, to keep being humble with all the technology we have. So we make it in service of nature, using it, combining technology and the materiality and the human experience as part of the animal experience also, and the nature experience. And the thing is that I think we developed a lot as the human thinking, I'm the master. And I think now as the crisis comes up, we feel like we are unable a bit. We experienced this in front of the recent coronavirus.
Right.
Yes, true.
And then we were all asking questions. The danger is like now we are taking back the machine and doing the same as, and guys, please let us have some reflection.
I mean, I think the main issue is still one of consumption, because if you look at NFTs and you know, you look at the statistics that one NFT could power like a whole country, you know, like in terms of usage, we're still we're consumers at the end of the day.
And this is where
no matter how you take it, you know?
This is where the fight must be, is like how we can perturb, how we can disturb the notion of aesthetics, because We have a lot of notions of what is beautiful and what we can buy. And this notion imposed by publicity, as we were saying, and how we can put meaning in front of
the audience.
Voila.
And science, because I do think that art and science speak to each other.
Exactly. So how we can disrupt that, and how we can maybe offer reflection instead of consumption, and share this among all of us, actually, as how we receive things. Right? Maybe.
I want to just add something to what you said. You said you're both children of war. I'm a child of war. I'm from Iraq. I've gone through wars. That's what got me into sustainability. And one of the things I really take pride of at the Expo is the fact that I always say we want it to look real, not beautiful. That's why if you go to the landscape and if you notice it, we don't use any pesticides or herbicides in our landscape. We use only native and adaptive species to reduce the water. But when you go through it, you'll see the caterpillars eating the plants, and you see the different bees and the birds and all of this. So we want to make it real. We don't want to make it, and at the end of the day, nature is art, and landscape as part of that art is very important.
I mean, I would even add to real, I would say utopic. I was very skeptical about Expo. I have to admit this before I went, but there is a certain utopia, a certain vision of what the world can be, or a certain, and it's good that it will remain. It's good that it's not just going to be torn down, because all that construction, but there is a certain utopia, and I don't mean it in an ideal sense. I just mean it in an architectural sense.
It's not about being ideal. It's about being real. And that's the whole point of what we were trying to develop. And beyond that, why I got into sustainability is because I couldn't see myself doing any more damage to anything. And I think that's the thing that got me to say, forget about all of these wonderful things. And I was working in the finance district in New York, so just to say, and I couldn't do it anymore. And so I switched gears and started from the bottom up, but just because I couldn't see myself not helping this planet in some way or another, in my small little way, I guess. And I think everybody on this panel is like that.
And
we
that
need to
brings,
reconnect with our roots.
And that brings me to a very important question on the chat that I'd like to address before we open it up to the audience, since we just have 15 minutes. What advice would each panelist give in terms of taking an individual action towards sustainability? So can each one of you just give me one action, however big or however small, to be more sustainable?
Maybe we start with Mar.
Whoever wants to start.
Sure. Well, I would say visit less malls and more galleries and be more inspired through art.
That's a good one.
Yes, and with the families, I think we have a lot of children coming here, and they're very inquisitive, and they're very informed about sustainability, much more than we were when we were kids. So it's beautiful to see how involved they are. Yes, take your kids more to see art exhibitions.
If they see something like this, they'll get curious, but they'll learn as well.
They will learn,
right?
exactly. Yeah. So coming from the art perspective, this is my advice.
And Dina, what about you?
I think it's empathy. I think if we're empathetic towards each other, we actually start understanding that my actions can affect the actions of somebody in Bangladesh who's making my t-shirt, or you know what I mean?
True.
Empathy is so important.
Don't worry, the key when people are starving.
Just empathize, look around you, and the most important, to me anyway, the most important core of sustainability is empathy.
I think we're at a time where we need radical empathy.
Yeah, we do.
Carsten?
I would say inform yourself. There's so much information out there on social medias or on other platforms, and a lot of it is fake. And I think everyone has a responsibility to inform themselves so they can actually make the right decisions. Not anything and everything that says organic, says sustainable is necessarily the right decision, because there's greed behind, unfortunately.
And is there one action that you do every day just to make it a bit better? Like just one thing, for example, not use plastic, or is there?
Short showers.
Interesting.
At the Dutch Pavilion, they were selling these little shower timers.
Really?
And yes, and my husband goes, "You need one of those."
Well, it's easy with my hair.
It's very hard to precise one, but it's englobing also what they are saying, and maybe
Plant more?
maybe plant with goodness. I mean, like not necessarily a tree. Plant with an action, with goodness behind.
Seed something.
You know, being an actor in space instead of being a consumer in space. So I think this is the trick. But action, you know, and nowadays it's like it's not necessarily something general and big and mass population, and just like little actions. If we are all in this sort of little actions of goodness,
Ripples on
I
water.
think it can change a lot. Just
I was going to go from the same perspective, because people need to believe in the impact they can do. Because even the smallest action can lead a bigger change. Like when people start considering the recycling, considering less water usage, or like just closing the window when they open the air conditioning, when they understand how much impact that can go to, I think that would change the behavior. So they can just go to digital world and take a small test how they to calculate their carbon emissions. That would even increase their awareness around what small things that they can change in their life to make it happen.
And I think it's not just an individual responsibility, it's collective too, and the government has a large role to play. We have a comment here that in Australia, the government handed out 4-minute shower timers as an order for everyone to follow. I don't mind that kind of dictatorship, to be honest. You know, I think it's good, like, because we are at the point where it's irreversible. The damage is irreversible. So we're way beyond, you know, now it's just about us saving the next generations, you know.
International, we don't necessarily need to wait governments to step in and tell us what to do. It should be, you know, from within, and we should all be sensible, because it's our future and it's our only land. So
Sure, but I think in situations where there is extreme crisis, extreme poverty, where there are other priorities, you know, and in those cases, then it needs to be done on a macro level rather than a micro level, you know. Yes.
And I think that a lot has been said, and I agree with all of this. I think empathy obviously is a starting point. Being an actor and not a consumer is very important. And yes, educate yourself. Yes, we talk about carbon footprint. Water footprint is there too, and it's connected so many things in our daily lives that it's very interesting concept that I think we like to educate everyone about. And it's really is so much ingrained in our daily lives. We live so in a fast-paced society that we really need to take a step back, I think. And,
but in terms of water, if all governments provided clean water, we'd be using less plastic, for example.
Yeah, but there are solutions. I mean, we were mentioning now we are in a point of no return. We just need to be adaptive and find mitigation solutions right now. And when there is, you know, a civil society organization raising red flags, is because there is something coming. And for instance, our food consumption, how do you eat daily has a huge effect on carbon emissions and also water consumption. So that's also one action that I would suggest everyone to do, to look at their food consumption. Yes, what type of foods are more environmentally friendly, and we can grow food at home. We can have cityscaping in our gardens. So there's so many things that we could do.
Sure.
And even this water bottle can change everything, because like using that plastic bottles and carrying them and throwing them everywhere very wasteful. So if you have bottles like this, that even creates change.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't speak about biodegradability. Firetti?
What I would like to add to the concept of empathy, which in my opinion is fundamental, is the concept of awareness, which was also mentioned, because it's really important for the user, consumer, or the, let's say, to know the origin of the product and the materials. What materials were used, why these materials were used, etc. And furthermore, I would like to add another concept, which is mutual respect, not only for each other, but also for nature. Because in my opinion, sustainable design is the only good design. And the only good way to consume things is to consume sustainable things.
Yeah.
So we can contribute to the circular economy, because sustainability is the future.
Right. Any questions? We actually have a few questions online, but I'll open it up here. Any questions in the audience? No? Okay, I have some really good questions here. I would just say one person elect to answer. How can producers and suppliers compete economically and maximize margins of producing using sustainable methods? Is it feasible for one to compete in existing markets long enough to make a tangible change? This is a more business related.
Yeah.
So basically, in our case, the only drawback at the barrier to entry, let's consider it that way, was an extensive research and development period of 5 years, because we didn't have any reference for our way of which we are doing things now. So we had to try a lot of things, and a lot of time was invested, a lot of funds as well. So that was the only drawback. But I will suggest now the sustainability, let's say, concept is much broader. And if you want to try a new sustainable way of producing things, you have much more information available. And you can brainstorm, you can become part of communities. So it isn't a drawback, in my opinion. It can become feasible, maybe not as fast as the conventional way, but it can become fast enough for it to be profitable.
Transparency as well.
Exactly.
And this is a yes or no question. Do the panelists believe there is a feasibility in the global community to work together in reaching 2050 goals, net zero emissions published by the IPCC?
Yes.
Do you think so?
Yeah. I mean, it's not an easy road, but when you see countries committing, a lot of people are skeptical even just about the commitment. And I say, they've actually taken the first step. 5 years ago, nobody wanted to say we will be net zero, because there's a lot of money to be invested in this from the government.
It's expensive.
And you know, the UAE is the 74th country. There's still so many other countries that haven't pledged. And that pledge, that barrier is mostly, well, it's too expensive, or oh, we should put our money here, not there. But there is this growing risk that the next big crisis is going to be global warming, or it is global warming.
Yeah.
But it is going to hit so hard that it's going to be even worse than the pandemic we just went through. So that risk outweighs the financial cost a million times over. And governments are understanding that, hence why they're saying, by 2050, we have to do this, or by 2060, we have to do this, and then putting money and strategies behind it. And there's a balance between us as consumers or actors and what we can do, but then that policy change, which I think is going to happen or is happening at an astounding rate in the region, but also across the world. And I think the outcomes of COP that's happening now is going to be very interesting to see.
And
I think history has shown us that when the human mind goes behind a certain idea, then innovation will happen, and it will go really, really fast. And I'm comfortable because we are sitting such a diverse group here at the gallery having this kind of conversation. So I'm comfortable and confident that young minds will come up with brilliant ideas within the next 5-10 years. That doesn't mean that someone else will solve it. We need to own it today, and we need to make decisions today.
Absolutely.
But we also need to embrace the ideas of tomorrow, and they will come from the young generation.
Yeah, true.
Any questions, comments in the audience? I'd like to end on that positive note then. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
you.